How you like that?
K-pop is everywhere.
Please welcome BTS, the biggest band in the world, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for them.
Smooth like butter.
And I consider myself to be one of the biggest BTS fans on planet Earth.
I mean, not just in Asia, it's all over the world. Their songs are being played by people who have no connections with Korean culture. These K-pop singers have become gods to teenagers all around the world. They are learning Korean, eating Korean food, watching K-dramas. And with that amount of attention comes a lucrative business. So profitable that BTS alone had brought $4 billion to South Korean economy. $4 billion. That's more than the net worth of Jay-Z, Kanye, Madonna, Dr. Dre, and Taylor Swift combined. So how did this happen? How did a couple of boy bands from an Asian country conquer the Western media? Some say they just got lucky, but luck doesn't cut it. They were all designed and engineered to be successful. And I'm not just talking about some companies or record labels. Yeah, they were involved too. But the origin of this success is way deeper than that. It includes a juicy history, big corporations, consumerism, and dinosaurs.
At long last, the misery and the bloodshed of the war in Korea has been halted.
To understand how South Korea became the entertainment giant it is today, first we gotta understand South Korea itself. And to do so, we gotta get back to the time that there was no South Korea. For centuries, the Korean peninsula included only one nation: Koreans. There was no South or North Korea. Though it wasn't easy to be surrounded by superpowers like China, Russia, and Japan, they kept their independence and remained a unified nation. Until the early 1900s, when Imperial Japan got greedy and started a plan to conquer Asia. As a result, Korea was annexed by Japan and a 35-year-old tragedy was started. Throughout the Japanese colonial rule, millions of Koreans were forced to work in Japanese mines and fight in the Japanese army. Almost 200,000 Korean women were forced into sexual slavery under the infamous labor of comfort woman. But the Japanese rule didn't last long. In 1940, Japan chose the wrong side of World War II and got into an alliance with Germany and Italy. We all know how that ended. With Japan out of the way, Korea was liberated. Well, sort of. The US and the Soviet Union, the two great superpowers who just won the war, divided Korea into northern and southern regions. The US occupied the southern region and the Soviets occupied the northern one. On paper, they were supposed to keep these regions for 5 years and then leave Korea to its people. But in reality, nothing went as planned. Less than 2 years after the end of the World War II, the friends became enemies. The US and the Soviet Union started a competition. Whoever brings more countries to their side wins the game. A battle between American capitalism and Russian communism. Meanwhile, Korea was the child of divorce. The North was subjected to communism and the South was subjected to capitalism. The contrast that led to the Korean War. A 3-year-long conflict that created this border and gave birth to South Korea. No, not that South Korea. This South Korea. South Korea was devastated after the war. Even before all of these, South Korea was an underdeveloped agricultural region. All the industrial power was focused on the north. Now that the war has destroyed everything in South Korea, they were in a miserable situation. In the 1950s, South Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world. So poor that without the foreign aid from the US, their whole nation would starve to death. This disastrous situation caused multiple protests, a violent coup d'etat, and a dictator named Park Chung-hee. Park Chung-hee seized power in 1961 and put all of his eggs in the basket of industrialization. His focus on the industrialization of South Korea gave birth to companies like Samsung, LG, and Hyundai. To save South Korea, Park Chung-hee dedicated everything, including the freedom of speech. So not only the media was left out, but also it was extremely censored. South Korea was going to become the manufacturing capital of the world. Everyone was obligated to work day and night to make this vision come true. No one should have a time to think about non-serious stuff like music or movies. This mindset resulted in South Korea emerging as a manufacturing giant in the following years. Their GDP went from $4 billion in the 60s to $280 billion in the 90s. More than 7,000% growth in just 30 years. Park Chung-hee's dream had come true. Although he was not there to see it for himself, karma got him first. When you're a dictator of an oppressive regime who imprisons his people by not letting them leave the country and forces them to work in factories at least 12 hours a day with no weekends and without receiving a minimum wage, you make a lot of enemies. And finally, one of them may pull his gun and shoot you. So in 1979, the inevitable happened, and Park was assassinated by the director of his intelligence service. Following his death, the attention to media and cultural exports grew among Korean politicians, but no one took a serious step towards it. Until 1993, the year that dinosaurs changed everything. Jurassic Park was a big hit. In the first year alone, it made almost $1 billion in profits. That was 1/8 of the total sales of Hyundai that year. The South Korean government was stunned by how much money a movie can make, how profitable this business is. Up until then, they would just look at the entertainment industry as a fun hobby. But now, they were seeing it as business, and it was huge. So the government decided to remodel the Ministry of Culture and then forced big companies to pour money into the entertainment industry. 4 years after that, South Korea experienced a tremendous financial crisis, and to bring back the lost fortune, the government doubled down on the entertainment industry. Around the same time, Japanese pop music or J-pop was a big hit. Japan had been in this game for a long time. The Japanese pioneered a lot of things in this industry, including the samurai cinema. In the 60s, when Koreans were suffering from post-war trauma, the Japanese started a new entertainment phenomenon, the idol model, a system of producing musical artists who do a lot more than just singing. Japanese idols were a full package. Singer, dancer, model, actor, public speaker, all at the same time. The Japanese idols evolved through time and became a huge phenomenon in the 80s, and they evolved to be something bigger than artists. They became something that people get obsessed with, fantasize about, and fall in love with. A group of cute girls that the male audience would do anything for. The idols were a money-making machine. In the eyes of the audience, they were the materialized version of perfection, and people would pay for anything these idols were involved with. Based on this successful business model, J-pop was born, Japanese pop music with inspiration from Western music, and it became a big thing in the 90s. J-pop idols were selling millions of records and appearing on every piece of Japanese media. So when South Korea decided to go all in with the entertainment industry, the Japanese were already there. The same Japanese that invaded Korea and made their lives miserable in the first place. So the Koreans were like, we're gonna enter this industry and we're gonna beat the Japanese. But first we're gonna understand why they're successful. Like a competitor analysis. They made a list of everything that helped the Japanese succeed and also everything that limited their success. And then they tried to copy their strength and get rid of their weaknesses. The biggest strength of J-pop was the idol model. So the Koreans decided to go with that model and even improve it to be an absolute money-making machine. This was a crucial part of the plan, but the main magic happened in the next step. Identifying the weakness of J-pop and not making the same mistake. J-pop was huge, but just for the Japanese market. They intentionally limited their audience. They just targeted Japan, and this limited their market. But the Koreans were not gonna make the same mistake. They chose a wider target audience, the world. K-pop was a perfected version of J-pop. Something that looked Korean but was actually westernized to be marketable to the world. Something that anyone from any part of the world would enjoy listening to. But it's not possible to make everybody happy. So they decided to narrow down the audience profile. Still, the target was the whole world, but only the teenagers. Why? Because they're flooded with different hormones that make them super emotional. So they have the potential to fall in love with the idols and make their parents pay for their records and concert tickets. Once the target audience was selected, the process of creating the idols began. With the industrial mindset from the past, the Korean government and entertainment agencies created a factory of artists. A system in which young kids go in and stars come out. A system that still exists and is the foundation of the K-pop industry. K-pop artists are designed to be successful. They're shaped that way. The agencies use talent shows to choose them at a young age, and then spend a huge money and time to prepare them, like training them to be successful. These kids have to go through years of hardcore training to be perfect at singing, dancing, and performing. And then when they're ready, they are placed in a group. These groups are not made by accident. Each member of these K-pop groups is there for a reason. These groups are like product placement for the agencies. After the groups are formed, the best producers and songwriters gather together to make their songs perfect. You wanna know why these songs are popular? Because they're perfect. The best composers composed them, the best songwriters wrote them, the best producers mixed them, and the best performers who had been training for years performed them. And they're designed to be appealing to the Western taste, aka the global taste. Why shouldn't they be perfect? These songs are products of a huge industry, and the singers are just the look of it. They are the idols, the perfect people who you think created the perfect music. The people who you practically fall in love with. And all of these artists are made to be fallen in love with. That's why they're not allowed to date anyone, because then they wouldn't seem available to the fans. They must always be something that fans fantasize about being with. After all, they are the idols, and the idol business is based on the fans thinking they have a chance with the idol. That's also why you don't see any K-pop bands with mixed genders, because they don't want the group members to start dating each other. The K-pop artists should always be available to keep the fantasy alive and make the sale. So that's basically how they made a billion-dollar business. Understanding the audience, creating the perfect product, and placing it at the right place and the right time. But of course, it has a dark side.
진통제 맞으면서 알아했던 사람들이야.
To create a K-pop star, agencies spend something close to $3 million. And when you spend that much on something, it has to work. Their investments have to be protected. So these stars have to undergo a lot of pressure, torture at some level. They have to stay thin, so they're only fed enough to keep them alive, which leads to serious eating disorders. They're forced to do intense workouts and trainings with no breaks, so intense that a lot of them just pass out in the middle of the training session. They have to do a lot of plastic surgery to be presentable, be beautiful, be the idol. They have to bleach their skin, remove parts of their jaw, and a lot of other horrific stuff. Because in the eyes of the companies, these are not human beings. They are objects, products, assets to create money, and they do not have a way out. Because when they were as little as 10 years old, they signed contracts that tied them to the game until they had no use for the agencies. Also, let's not forget that not every K-pop band becomes BTS. There are hundreds of boy bands and girl bands forming every year. Every single one of them enter this artist-making factory the same way and get prepared the same way, but only some of them make it to the billboard. The others are just faulty products. They get eliminated in the process. The factory mindset says, make a lot of products so that the chance of having successful ones increases. The ones that didn't succeed are just thrown away to make room for the successful ones. It's a lucrative business, but it's not a cute one. It just looks cute from the outside. From inside, it's a brutal labor camp. This was the price that had to be paid to put Korea on top of the game.